All right, and we're live. Here we go.
Oh, is it not woo time yet?
I mean, was that your woo?
Well, it was going to be, and then you looked at me, so now I don't know if the podcast has started.
We're recording, if that's what you mean.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Papa, can you hear me?
All right, this is our worst intro so far.
Oh, it's so bad. Anyway, take it away, Dustin.
All right. Welcome to History According to Hollywood.
Woo!
There we go. That was an okay one.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Cool.
What are we talking about today?
We're talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's right. 2019. Hard to believe this. 4 years.
I know. That's crazy. I feel like it just came out. And because I hadn't watched it until this point, I was convinced that it was like a new-ish movie.
Yeah, this is your first time watch.
Oh, yeah.
We almost immediately had mine.
I'd seen
Braveheart.
the meme with like Leonardo DiCaprio in the
whoop,
in
whoop.
the sitting room.
This is me.
No, yeah, like the
Here I am.
with no context.
Really cool. I got some cool facts about that scene.
Okay.
We'll get to that later. So yeah, this is Quentin Tarantino's 9th film.
Nice.
It is the winner of 2 Oscars, including Best Supporting Actor for Brad Pitt. It was also nominated Best Picture and Best Director. So obviously the critics liked it.
Well, it has like a 7.5 on IMDb, I think.
Something along those lines. It seems like a lot of these are sitting at like a 7.5, 8.5.
Which is basically like really good but not great kind of idea.
There's also a lot of really bad movies on IMDb that are like a 5-star. And I'm like, 5 out of 10.
And then there's movies like Highlander that are like a bottom barrel 7, and you watch and you're like, I don't know how, but okay.
All right, whatever. I don't know.
There can be only one, and I guess it was this one.
I don't know. I feel like there's not a good, ever since Rotten Tomatoes got kind of, a little more political. I don't think there's a good solid way of looking up, oh, is this a good movie or is this not? Because you just can't trust anybody. Just watch it and find out for yourself. That's my life motto. Find out for yourself.
Yeah, how's that worked for you? Just
great.
Out of curiosity.
So fantastic.
All
right. So we open with a trailer for Bounty Law, a Western starring Rick Dalton.
Leonardo DiCaprio. Man, does this have a cast? Oh my God,
wait till
I know.
Another thing. I'm so excited to talk about this movie. I feel like this is how the Captain Crunch has the oops, all berries. Yeah. I feel like this is a oops, all Hollywood. Like I'm so excited to talk about this.
It was impressive. It reminded me cast-wise of Heat, the movie from the 90s that has like everybody from the 90s in it. Same thing. And you didn't know it till you watched it. Yeah. Same thing with this movie. You're like, oh my God. Like,
yeah.
Who isn't in this movie?
There's a lot of times where I like to look at something or I look at somebody, I'm like, I know them. Who are they? And I have to look it up on IMDb, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember them from this movie.
I think a sign of a good passion project is when like actors that can lock down leads end up being supporting characters, which happens in this movie a lot.
Yeah.
Which the acting in this movie is awesome. Like I'll just go out, like they bring it maybe more so than any other movie we've discussed. Like.
Really, I think, we talked about this being a double feature, a Brad Pitt double feature, and man, Brad Pitt, this has to be one of his best acting roles.
Yeah.
And because what I really like about this is that they're supposed to be real people.
Yeah.
They're not really characters, but they're real people who play characters.
Right.
So there's so many different layers to each character. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio's character probably has the most depth.
Yeah.
And has the biggest, path in this movie. But man, Brad Pitt just kills it.
I think Brad Pitt is the master because he kind of does this to a smaller degree in 12 Years a Slave. He became like later in his career, like he has become the master of really important supporting characters with very little backstory and just nailing it. Like just taking it at face value and then just like destroying the character in the best way. Like,
well, he won an Oscar for it.
Yeah. I mean, as he should have.
100%. All right. So Bounty Law is not a real Western at the time, but boy, late 60s, this was the time for Westerns. The two of the most popular shows on cable or network television were Gunsmoke and Bonanza.
Well, didn't Gunsmoke run for like 20 seasons or something?
Gunsmoke ran for a stupid amount of time.
For like long enough that you can't recognize the leads at the end of the show if you found
they look like different people. Also, it went from black and white to color.
Oh yeah.
which I mean, multiple shows did. Gunsmoke wasn't the only one, but yeah, Gunsmoke ran for a long time, and I mean,
but Gunsmoke ran for like a long time in black and white, and then ran for a long time in color.
Right. So anyone who like, you can't understate the impact that these Western shows had. There's an entire channel called INSP. It's on cable, and I worked in nursing homes, and let me tell you, man, it is on probably every other TV in the nursing home is on this channel, and all they do is play Westerns from this era.
One of my dad's guilty pleasures when he got like real in his feels and nostalgic, would you just walk in and he'd be watching like The Rifleman or The Virginian on that channel?
Yeah.
And you're just like, Dad, you're not that old. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I remember I even watched a little Gunsmoke and Bonanza when I was a kid because my grandparents watched it. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a part of American culture, and I think this is a movie that does it have a plot? I'm
gonna say no. Like, I'm just gonna go out and say no.
I think if you watch the second time you watch it, you realize more of the plot because you can see where the characters go. Again, mostly Rick Dalton, Leonardo DiCaprio's character, who's who we're following the most. But there is a story to be told there. But really, I think this is a snapshot of American culture and the late '60s Hollywood. And that's where the little dream world that we live in for 2.5 hours in this movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead. I will say, I'll preface what I just said and edit a little bit. I did think there was a plot until about from 20 minutes like to the end of the movie, then to the end of the movie. Like the last 20 minutes, I was like, okay, never mind. There's no plot. Like, I don't know what this is anymore. I've given up.
Doesn't this movie just make you want to move to Hollywood and just be an actor and smoke cigarettes and drink all the time?
Maybe if it showed people who were happier doing that, but no, not so much. They all seem like really sad humans, except for Sharon Tate. Sharon
Tate's living her best. Sharon Tate's whole group is living her best life.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't know. Rick Dalton has some issues, but Cliff seems pretty happy. Also, we should say Brad Pitt's character's name's Cliff. Yeah. We can't just keep going back and forth.
We'll get to that later in the podcast. Yeah. But anybody in the know knows the irony of us saying Sharon Tate and her crew are living their best life.
I have a quote for that later.
Oh, good.
All right, let's move on. Okay. So CBS and NBC are mentioned early on. These networks use essentially what the where we start out is Rick Dalton is an aging star. He's past his prime, and these networks use aging stars as featured guests on their shows to boost ratings. But Al Pacino comes in. Al Pacino is in this freaking movie, and he's like a small character.
Yeah,
whatever. No big deal.
He's like the seedy agent guy.
Yeah. I honestly, is he his agent? I don't even know.
Well, he's a recruiter, right? Like, isn't he kind of like a recruiter agent for spaghetti westerns? Like, that's his whole.
I think so. Yes. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense actually. So, anyways, he's convinced by Al Pacino that this is a way of putting him down. He is, and this kind of brings up the first glimpse we get that Rick Dalton's got just a hint of insecurity just throughout this film, just a tiny bit,
just a bit.
So, anyways, he's offered to star in spaghetti westerns, Italian movies depicting American Western genre. I love spaghetti westerns, but they're not everybody's cup of tea. So he's originally he's like, wow, man, spaghetti westerns suck.
Yeah,
I don't want to star in them. They're terrible.
Well, it's isn't it part of the lead up is that he was a star, but he's one of those stars that hops around a couple different movies and shows and then lands nowhere. So he's not the equivalent of like Leonardo DiCaprio, ironically, who plays him. He's more like maybe like a Miles Teller until very recently, or like an Austin Butler before Elvis. Like, you recognize him.
Who's in this movie?
Yeah, and you know him, but he's not like your A-list.
No, he's not an A-list. So he's kind of being used, like I said, to boost ratings. And actually, I'll just go ahead and skip to this. One of the shows that he is featured in is called FBI. And the actual star that was in it was Burt Reynolds.
Nice.
In that specific episode, the episode that Leonardo DiCaprio stars in. Okay, so the FBI show that Rick Dalton guest stars in was a real show that ran from 1965 to 1974. The episode he stars in, called All the Streets Go Silent, originally stars Burt Reynolds, and Tarantino actually recreated shots from the episode with Leonardo DiCaprio in it. And so I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, they did that with The Great Escape too. We're kind of
That's
jumping all over the plot here, but like
The Great Escape is supposed to be an audition tape,
right?
Where he auditioned and then Steve McQueen eventually got the part. Is that they CGI'd Leonardo DiCaprio into The Great Escape.
Yeah, which is ironic because Steve McQueen does make like a 6-minute appearance in this
Yeah, he
movie.
does, and he kind of breaks down the love triangle between Sharon Tate, Roman Polanski, and J.C. Breen,
which is one of the many confusing things in this movie.
It is a little bit, but it's actually supposed to be true that J.C. Breen was in love with Sharon Tate, and he was one that, in real life, he was one that was murdered at the Tate residence.
Yes, he was.
He gets kind of insecure about this. He kind of has a breakdown. They're driving around, and we come across the first of many hippies.
Yep.
Man, are there a lot of hippies in this movie.
Pillaging a dumpster.
Pillaging a freaking
As
dumpster.
One does.
Giving up peace signs.
Oh, yeah.
Not shaving their armpits.
Being noticeably underage and flirting with 50-year-old men in cars.
As you do.
As one does.
It's Brad Pitt.
Okay, that's fair.
Nah, that isn't fair. Now, if it was another 50-year-old, okay.
Yeah. Well, case in point, I mean, if they were flirting with like Leonardo DiCaprio in the car, you'd be like, okay, man, like maybe not. But Brad Pitt is jacked in this movie. Okay.
Yeah, he's what Fight Club was in the 90s, and he looks pretty much the same.
We'll talk about Troy next week, and he kind of looks like you took him out of Troy, you buried him in the sand for 5 years to make him look like coarse and wrinkled, and then you just shook him off and put him in the movie.
Yeah. So, anyways, we see our first hippies, and I have my first question for you, Kyle. This is a very broad, very general question.
Okay.
What does history say about the hippie movement?
That is an excellent question because people can't really decide what history should say about the hippie movement. That being said, it was, generally speaking, a counterculture youth movement in the 60s. So, to give a little historical background, the idea of a teenager didn't exist until the 1950s. And even then, it was Elvis and it was rock and roll, but it was still like you dressed up to go places and you drove your Thunderbird car and you looked like nice when it at all possible.
You worked at the factory after school.
Yeah, you work your full-time job, you get your pension. You're still part of society. You're just like a new part of it. Hippie counterculture is more of a rebellion's probably too strong of a word, a pushback against that. And it's that, free living, peaceful vibes, unlock your mind. And hippie is just like an umbrella term. So the hippies that we see in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are kind of the extreme end of like the hippie counterculture movement. Most people aren't quite that abrasive and quite that like drugged out of their mind all the time as the hippies are, but you'll find out why that's the case when we get a little further into the movie. So it's one of those weird things too where people were alive who were part of the hippie movement and they have very different opinions on it than the people who were alive who weren't part of the hippie movement. But generally speaking, it's a youth-based counterculture that instead of organized and nicely dressed and put together at 9 to 5, it's, hitchhiking and parties on the beach and bonfires and
digging in trash for your next meal.
Yeah. So it's like a spiritual awakening is the concept, I think.
Now, how much of this is fueled by the Vietnam War?
That is a really interesting question because hippie counterculture really kind of starts in the same time as the Vietnam War, but whether or not it was a direct relation to it, I don't know. I do know that the more that the government and part of the populace supports the Vietnam War and is like, violence is the way that we uphold the social order and armed defense, the more the hippie movement grew, because that's just how it goes. Case in point, the more the hippie movement grew, the more people pushed back and were like, no, you freewheeling crazy people. Like, that's not how we should live. I mean, we have to have structure. We have to have order, this, that, and the other.
Boy, did they make some good music, though.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that the hippie movement was a global movement.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't just American. It was primarily in Western Europe and the United States, but there were hippie movements in Chile. There were hippie movements throughout South America. So, yeah, it was a global counterculture movement, but I think that media-wise, it's been focused in the U.S. and Britain just because it coincides with psychedelic rock a lot.
Well, I mean,
which, yeah,
you take away the music, is there a hippie movement?
Yeah.
I
don't know. It's hard to be a hippie listening to like Johnny Be Good, right? So
yeah, that's true. I mean, that's true. Okay, so we talked about earlier, like, is there a plot? Is there not a plot? So we're going to cover a lot of things. And essentially, what happens in the film while we're covering these things is they drive home, and then and then Cliff gets in his car, and then he drives to his house. Ooh. So we're passing by Hollywood. We're seeing the ritzy end of it. We're seeing the hippies walking barefoot across the street, and then we're seeing the back of a drive-in and some trailer where Cliff lives.
Before we get too far, I almost forgot. It's important to note that the movie takes place in 1969, and that is the peak of the hippie movement. 1967 to like 1969 or 1970. I just double-checked my notes. So it would not be uncommon to see hippies in anywhere, but especially like big cities, and especially cities on the West Coast, which just tend to be a little more like liberal-minded than their East Coast counterparts. Like that's just how it's been for forever. So yeah, LA in 1969, there's going to be a lot of hippies for sure.
I can imagine. And then we're introduced to the real star of the movie, Cliff Booth's dog, Brandy, who eats canned raccoon and rat flavored dog food.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. I didn't bother to look that up. I know that there were a lot of weird brands and a lot of weird advertising gimmicks.
Yeah, it says on the can raccoon flavored, and another one says rat flavored. There's one more. I don't remember what the other one was.
I would be equally unsurprised if that was like a real thing that they researched, or if Quentin Tarantino just made it up. It was like, this sounds like a fun thing to feed a dog,
I don't know. So we mentioned earlier that Steve McQueen explains the love triangle. We have this long drawn out party scene where essentially it's just Margot Robbie dancing around in a very bright yellow
best part
outfit.
Of the movie.
Yeah, Kyle's favorite part
best
of the movie.
Part of the movie.
He watched it 3 times.
I did not. I would watch that scene 3 times, but I did not.
No, that's what I mean. He kept backing it up and watching it.
There's not enough Sharon Tate in this movie. That's all I'm gonna say.
And fun fact, there is the real Sharon Tate in this movie.
Yeah, there is. When she goes to the movie theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also her jewelry. In that scene where they're dancing, that is actually Sharon Tate's jewelry. I don't think it's her actual outfit, but it is the her sister, Sharon Tate's sister, lent the movie or the production her sister's jewelry, and Margot Robbie's actually seen dancing around in it.
That's really cool, because I found out that the outfit that she wears when she goes and watches her own movie later in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is an actual outfit. Maybe not the clothes themselves, but it's like an actual outfit recreation of something that Sharon Tate wore while starring in a different movie.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
They really, they do their research, like clothing wise.
100%.
Like
Yeah, there's a reason that Tarantino's been making movies for, almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
And he's only made 9 of them.
Yeah. He puts the work in.
He puts the time in for sure. There's so many Easter eggs and so many little things in this. Anyways, moving on to the next day, we're on set. Randy from Green Hornet. This is Kurt Russell, who also narrates the film.
Yeah, he does. I got that about halfway through. I was like, oh my God, that's Kurt Russell.
Yeah. So he's playing double duty here. Anyway, so I was so confused about the Bruce Lee cameo.
Jet Li.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be confused too if Jet Li had a cameo in 1969.
Yeah. Wait, hold on a second. No, the Bruce Lee cameo. It's because they're shooting an episode of the Green Hornet.
Yeah, and he's Kato.
Yeah, so I didn't put those two together until this time when I watched it.
That's why I have the master's degree, baby.
Well, we can't all Wikipedia like you, so.
Wow. Wow. I will have you know that I occasionally tap into better parts of Google.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
I even read a journal article last week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Step up.
It wasn't about this, but it was.
Say it with your chest, Dustin. What are you trying to tell me?
I'm kidding. Okay. So Cliff is accused of murdering his wife. And we have a little flashback. He's sitting there with this snorkel gear on. He has a spear gun sitting across his lap, and his wife is just nagging him. And he just looks so dead. He looks so just blank face. Like, kill me now.
And at first you're like, this guy didn't murder his wife. Like, there's no way. And then the longer the movie goes on, the more you're like, I think he killed his wife.
So in the novel, this is also not.
Okay.
So Tarantino made a novelization of this film. in the novel, it explains that he did, in fact, kill his wife.
Oh, man.
It's essentially an accident. Like it happens. I guess I haven't read it. I want to. I haven't gotten to it yet. But essentially, the gun's across his lap. His wife's nagging him, and he kind of accidentally pulls the trigger and shoots her. And he's like, crap, and just kind of has to go along with it. He didn't plan it, but it's just kind of what happened.
That's still murder one, man.
Yeah. Okay, so anyways, very famous scene here of Bruce Lee and Cliff having a little 3-round kind of playful fight game, takedown game, whatever
I don't know,
you want to call it.
throwing a guy into a car is playful.
Throws the guy into the car. It's hilarious.
Well, and it's because, also, I just want to point out that I think that was an excellent representation of young Bruce Lee. Like, from everything that I can understand, like, Bruce Lee in his 20s was just a prick. Like, he was good. Like, he was a great martial artist.
When no one can touch you, what are you going to do?
And I don't know if he was actually like that, but his public persona was like, I can take anybody in a fight.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. And he's going on this rant about how, like, Cassius Clay is an excellent fighter because he fights with the will to kill, like, if he needs to, and he's drawing a comparison to himself. And he's like, and every other kung fu master in the world won't do that, but that's what I do when I go into the ring. And somebody finally asks, so what would happen if you met Cassius Clay? And he goes, well, that would never happen. We're two different fighting disciplines. And he goes, okay, but, in theory, like, if that happened, what would happen? And he goes, well, I would defeat Cassius Clay. Like, I would wipe him from the floor or whatever. And Brad Pitt laughs. And it's important to note that Cassius Clay is the original name of Muhammad Ali.
Right. Yes.
So, yeah, that's Bruce Lee telling people that he would
beat up Muhammad Ali.
He could take Muhammad Ali in a fight.
Well,
and I don't know whether he could or he couldn't, but that is a bold claim.
That's a bold claim.
Especially in 1969, because Muhammad Ali in the late 60s is he's terrifying his whole career, but
I can't see that going either way, in all honesty, because I feel like they're both skilled enough that they would be able to avoid being attacked too hard, and I feel like they would just kind of get tired and be like, all right, this is pointless.
Look, so as a former second degree black belt, I'm just telling you that you can deal with size differences for a little bit, and I think Bruce Lee was maybe one of the baddest men to like ever walk the face of the earth. He just was. That being said, if he couldn't like cripplingly injure Muhammad Ali in the first couple seconds, he is a dead man, because Muhammad Ali is just huge and very strong. He's
got a lot of size.
And
if
he got a hold of him or got close enough to him to actually haymaker him, it'd be really bad.
Yeah.
Whether or not he could do that, I don't know. My money on this hypothetical fight that isn't even important for the plot of the movie that we just went on a tangent on, I'm putting my money on Cassius Clay, baby. Like,
I'm putting
float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, bitch.
I would put it as a draw. That's where I would put it.
Okay.
I know that's a boring ass.
We're gonna have to contact the guys at Spike TV to like reamp the world's
like that
greatest
Rocky
warriors.
movie. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So, anyways, this is all really in a flashback, and Cliff's on Rick Dalton's roof fixing a satellite.
Well, it's why he can't get the job as the stunt guy.
Because
he's Rick's. Did we specify that he is Rick Dalton's stunt man?
No, we did not.
Okay, so to backpedal a little bit for a very important plot point that we somehow glossed over.
That is in the very opening scene.
That is incredibly important for the entire movie. We might as well have just told you a 5-minute snippet and then turned off the podcast. So Brad Pitt's character, Cliff, is the stunt double for Leonardo DiCaprio's character, Rick Dalton, since the very beginning of Rick Dalton's successful part of his career, but he is paid usually by Rick Dalton, like out of Rick Dalton's own pocket or by the studio. So he's unemployed at the moment because Dalton is so down.
So he's unemployed, and instead he's fixing satellites on a roof. And that's when
Margot Robbie's character dances in her house. I just felt like that was really important just for people to know.
Well, while she's dancing in her house, little creepy McGee, Charles Manson shows up.
Little like dirty hobbit looking dude. Yeah.
Dude, what a freaking weirdo.
Weird little hippie elf.
So anyways, Manson arrives at Tate's house looking for former residents Terry Melcher, who was a music producer popular for producing California rock albums in the 60s. Most famously, he produced a couple of the Byrds' early albums. So anyways, if you don't know, Charles Manson was a singer and tried to break through into the rock scene and never did.
Well, he was, if my research is correct, some of his songs were recorded by the Beach Boys, and one of them even made it onto the B-side of an album, but he was uncredited.
Yeah. So I mean, he was trying to break into the scene. I guess he did a little bit. If that's the case, then yeah.
I mean, the unfortunate truth is apparently he was a good enough singer to be like noticed by the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean, Hitler painted and Charles Manson sang pop rock. Yeah.
Right.
Small world.
So I don't know if that's all right. Anyways, so whenever he's kind of annoyed that the Terry Melcher doesn't live there anymore, so he leaves. There's just kind of this unsettling kind of feeling during this scene.
It's the way that he's asking is super duper weird. You know, like just his attitude while asking. It's like, okay, like why are you still here?
I did think it was interesting. So also another piece of history: Roman Polanski, Sharon Tate's husband, cannot enter the United States because of a. Well, just look up the case that's against him, so we don't use terminology that people don't like to hear.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it ain't good.
No, it's not. So, but I was glad that he's kind of just a little weirdo and he's barely in it. So I was like, that's fine.
And I think he's like an accurately framed weirdo. Like they didn't try to like caricature him. He just is a guy like Polanski, not Manson. We've moved on to Roman Polanski. He's just like he doesn't seem like a awful dude at first, but just the few scenes he's in, he's clearly like an unfriendly person. Like he's not somebody that people are going to be friends with. Is really the vibe you get.
All right, so then Manson leaves and he's not brought up for quite a while.
Right.
Okay, so we move on to Rick Dalton is guest starring on a show.
Yeah.
He's playing the villain. It is the Sorry. Okay. Yes. So Rick Dalton is on set for the pilot of a show called Lancer.
Right.
And anyways, I think they changed the name of it in the film, but it's a real show. Lancer's a real show.
Okay.
Okay. So anyways, he meets Trudy Fraser. Is a fictional person, a child actress that's a method acting more or less next to Rick Dalton.
Weirdly, she's like his spiritual guide. Did you know like that's kind of the role she plays?
I think it really shows his insecurity of like she takes it so seriously, and he's a very old school and she's a new school, but she takes it so seriously. And then whenever he does well in his scene, and she's like, "That's the best acting I've ever seen," it brings him to tears.
Yeah, well, because the first day he shows up super hungover, like just visibly hungover.
Yeah,
and I don't want to claim that all actors did that, but from what I understand, that wasn't a super uncommon thing. And even today, it's not uncommon for especially like kind of past their prime, washed up, quote unquote, actors to show up thinking they can just phone it in and throw in a good performance because, he's Rick Dalton.
Right.
And she kind of reminds him in their first conversation that you have a job to do. And like, it's all about the pursuit of like doing the job.
The pursuit of perfection. Yeah. Of course, you won't reach it, but it is the pursuit that matters.
Yeah, and it's this little 8-year-old girl is like Rick Dalton's spiritual awakening into his craft, where she's like, be who you used to be,
Right.
Like, do what you used to do.
So we kind of have two scenes going on at the same time, so we're just going to talk about Rick Dalton's scene, and then we'll go back to a different scene.
Yeah.
That we keep kind of bouncing back and forth between. The novel that Rick is reading mirrors his struggles as an actor. He's reading a book about a what do you call it?
A bronco buster.
A bronco buster. I was going to say a horse breaker, and that wasn't right. A bronco buster who suffers
a glue maker. Like.
Right, yeah. So he suffers an injury, and he's never the same again. So it's kind of showing that he's past his prime, and he has to come to grips with the fact that he's not the best. And that's what Rick Dalton is having to do.
Yeah, you're no longer like the prime guy, but you can still have a career if you just accept that you're not the hottest thing on the market.
He had his run with Bounty Law. That was his most popular show. That was his most popular time. It's passed. Now he's doing these lesser roles.
And there's a throwaway line in there that I thought was really important that I happened to catch. And Bounty Law ends because he resigns to chase a movie, like to be in a movie, and the movie flops. So he in one of his many like self-hatred rants, he is yelling at himself that he got Bounty Law canceled all because he wanted to try the movie scene.
Right.
And he's in a handful of Hogan's Hero type, like, Inglourious Bastards type movies, and then his career disappears.
Right.
And so it's in his self-loathing, he's like, I am my own worst enemy. Like, I had this great job, I had this great show, everybody loved me, and I canceled it to try to be famous, more famous. and now I'm less famous than I ever was.
Which I think is also, that's relatable because a lot of people don't they don't appreciate what they have, and are always searching for more. That could be your career. That could be, a lot of things.
And even in today's Hollywood, think how many people have had successful TV shows and then never had anything else. And I don't want to discredit having a successful TV show. It's hard, but Drake and Josh are not like Marvel stars. Like, for example, like, a lot of people have one good TV show and then that's kind of it.
Okay, so then we get to where Rick Dalton is acting. He's the villain in this pilot episode. Everything starts out pretty good, and we hear him the night before going over his lines.
But he's drinking the whole time.
But he's drinking, and so he gets through probably about the first couple scenes that they're shooting, and then when he starts to ramp up the intensity, he starts forgetting his lines a little bit.
Yeah, and he never does poorly. Like, he always manages to get back into character, but the guy playing opposite him never breaks.
Right.
And everybody else in the scene never breaks. And it's in his mind, and it's kind of alluded to this in the film, it's his last opportunity to get back into the business. And he worries that he's letting it slip through his fingers.
Right. And he talks about he goes to his trailer, and that's actually an improv scene.
That's amazing.
And it's completely improvised. And actually, the idea of him forgetting his lines was added by DiCaprio. It was his idea to show the extent of his alcoholism.
Wow.
And the effects that it's having on him. So that's an interesting thing. And it does also, you have to look at how, if you watch that scene, look at how hard he's working. You can see the effort and how hard he's working and how easy it seems for everybody else.
Yeah.
So you see how he's at his boiling point. He goes to his trailer, he's throwing stuff around. He's like, not one more drink, not another drink. And then he starts to drink and he throws it out the window. He throws
it out the door.
And then he comes back and he's like...
He starts talking to himself in the mirror as if he's a different person, which I found really, really funny, even though it's a very intense scene. Like, you can't help but laugh because he is screaming at his reflection as if it's a different person.
Right. And then he comes back and he kills it. He kills it and he nails it. He does great. And that's when the director's a huge fan of it, and the little girl, the director gives him huge props.
Well, they all think he does amazing.
Yeah. And he's like, thank you. And then the girl says, that's the best acting I've ever seen. And he just like cries. He just breaks down.
Well, and real quick, credit to Leonardo DiCaprio to be an actor, playing a character, and giving that level of performance, not as yourself, not as the character that you are portraying, but as a character that your character is portraying.
And apparently it was quite challenging for him to act like an actor who's struggling to act.
Yeah. Well, of course it is, because he's so freaking good at it.
Well, I mean, there's so many layers to it, and it would be one of those characters that's very hard to portray.
Go ask Patrick Mahomes to act like he doesn't know how to throw a football.
Right.
Like that. I feel like it would be difficult.
Have him act like he's acting like he doesn't know how to throw a football.
Yeah, have him act like he is acting like he's acting like he can't. Yeah.
While Taylor Swift's in the arena.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that scene wraps up. We kind of have a little bit of a redemption arc for Rick Dalton. And then it's on to the celebration. He's going to go to Italy, and he's going to end up making 4 spaghetti westerns in like 6 months.
6 months. I mean, spaghetti westerns are pretty thrown together.
Yeah.
You know?
It's kind of it's not like a throwaway scene, but we really fast forward through this little. Once he has that's really the end of his character development.
Yeah.
He goes to Italy, he comes back, and then we have the finale.
Well, we have 2 main character arcs and then the side character arc.
Right.
And so the finale of Rick Dalton's main character arc is that he redeems himself enough to be in spaghetti westerns, make some money, get his mojo back, and then he comes back to Hollywood.
Yeah. All right. So that is the end of that. Now let's back up a little bit and let's go to where Sharon Tate has her, at least, I guess, most character-driven scene.
Yeah,
I don't know. She watches a movie of herself.
Scene, I think. Well, it's to show the different. I think it's to show the different types of people and the different goals of people in Hollywood. Because Sharon Tate, most famous for her untimely death, as I'm sure most of the people listening to this podcast now, was an up-and-coming actor who had managed to land roles in a lot of pretty well-received movies with a couple of bigger names in it, and she was just right at the cusp of maybe breaking through and becoming, an A-list star when she was murdered. And this movie takes place right as she is in that period of her life. So she is on the main strip, I think, where the movie theaters are, and she notices a movie during the day. A movie theater is playing a matinee of the latest movie that she was just in.
The Wrecking Crew from 1968, starring Dean Martin, which is an actual film that Sharon Tate's in, and the footage that she's watching in the theater is the real movie. It's the real Sharon Tate on the screen.
So she shows the people that she is in the movie, that she is Sharon Tate. She points out the character on the poster that she is. They see her and they're like, oh my God, yes.
They're like, can you stand over by the poster so we know who you are?
Right. And she manages to go in, and it becomes clear very quickly that it's not an ego thing. It's not like the times Rick Dalton has referenced his own shows or watched it. It's not I want to see how great I am. She went to see how well she was received by others.
Yeah, like whenever she does something and people laugh, it makes her smile.
Yeah.
And it's almost like she's like almost not bewildered, but she's amazed that like, oh my God, this is me. Like, I'm up there.
I'm in that movie and I'm making people happy, you know?
All right, so a little metaphoric here, but she's just so happy walking around. She's living a life that, very few of us could even dream of ever having. So I wrote, while watching this, I said, is Sharon Tate's character a metaphor for the blissful ignorance of the fortunate ones in Hollywood at this time, and her real-life tragic ending the audience knows about makes us feel like this is a capsule that is long gone by the present day?
That is a really incredibly deep point. I think that, yeah, probably. I don't know what Tarantino was envisioning, but when I watched it, it's Rick and Cliff are the reality of even Hollywood today, but especially like the tail end of the golden age of Hollywood. And Sharon Tate is like what we all want to think it was like. And
just
for a handful of people,
into success.
Yeah, I mean, for a handful of people, it was. It always is. I mean, you don't just make up those stories. There's always a sample that you can take from. But across the board, there are more than likely there were far more Rick Daltons and Cliffs than there were Sharon Tates, and it's her sheer happiness to just entertain people is what makes it so uplifting, because it's like, oh, finally somebody who actually cares what the audience thinks and like what she's bringing to others, not what her movie gives to her, sort of deal.
Now we're going to see the flip side to that.
Yeah.
So we have the love of Hollywood. We have the glory of Hollywood. Now we're going to see...
We have the sheer necessity of needing a job.
Further than that even, we're going to see the dark underbelly whenever our other character, Cliff Booth, is going to go visit Spawn Movie Ranch.
It's interesting because it's the blue collar side of Hollywood meeting the underbelly of like hippie counterculture.
Right.
It's a fascinating combination.
Spawn Movie Ranch was a real location that the Manson family stayed. The Lone Ranger and Bonanza were both shot at this ranch years before it was used by the Manson family.
Yep.
Whenever he shows up, Manson is not there.
No.
But my goodness, is there a group of hippies?
Oh my gosh.
This is the most star-studded group of hippies of all time.
One of the hippies that they see in the beginning of the movie, he gives a hitchhike ride to the ranch. And he's like, oh, hey, I know the guy who owns that ranch. I might stop by and say hi to him. It's been a while.
Well, because he's saying, hold on, you're saying a bunch of hippies are staying at this ranch?
Right.
That's where the suspense comes in.
Yeah.
Because it's never spoken. He never says, I need to go check and make sure he's okay.
But you can see the wheels are turning, and he's like,
Well, and obviously, so I think something that's kind of downplayed in this movie is the fact that, it's such I shouldn't say everyone. So many people know the story of what happened that a lot of it is unspoken.
Yeah, so it's only ever mentioned that this is the Manson family, but if you know like the name Spawn Ranch, or if you are even aware of like how the Manson family lived and where they operated, it becomes really clear really quickly that that's who they are.
So we're gonna see a very star-studded group of hippies here. We have Elvis himself, Austin Butler.
Oh yeah.
We have Sydney Sweeney from Euphoria.
Yep.
Mikey Madison, which for most people nobody would care, but she is in Scream 5.
Of course you would know.
Of course I care.
You probably recognized her on sight.
I did.
You? Oh my God.
Maya Hawke.
Scream 5, folks. Not even Scream 1.
No, Scream 5.
Scream 5. The one that nobody likes, nobody watched.
No, a lot of people like it, but I personally don't like it.
Never mind. The one that he doesn't like, but he recognizes the actress anyway.
I did recognize her. Okay.
You have a problem.
I might. We'll get to that at a different episode. Maya Hawke from Stranger Things. Danielle Harris from Halloween 4 and 5. And Dakota Fanning, who was a child actress from War of the Worlds and Man on Fire.
That is a whole lot of talent. To
That's
bring
a
to,
lot of
like,
talent.
A sidestep hippie Manson family scene.
A lot of talent and very little shoes.
But it pays off. I mean,
it does. And you know, I really feel like they capture, as someone who kind of I didn't ever live like a full on hippie, but as someone who partook. Is it partook?
It's partook, yeah.
Partook. I don't think I've ever said that word before. The past tense.
You could
of
also
partake.
just say, like, you know, engaged in.
Has partaken.
Oh
no,
God.
I wanted partake to be my word.
Dustin done partaked from hippie culture.
I done partaked. Anyways, moving on.
Jesus Christ.
Really captures the whole like hanging out doing a whole lot of nothing that went into a lot of wasted days.
Well, hey, two of them are leading horse rides.
Yeah.
Texting
for two
that
people, how are they making money off of this?
You know, but that's a real thing that the Manson family did. That's how they maintained their cover. And I mean, you still got to buy food. You can only scavenge so much from dumpsters.
Boosting a lot of cars too.
Yeah, so
right?
That's what they did. But the ranch is shockingly empty. Like for people who are running a horse business, in real history, it's because they, shortly after being accepted in the original group of the Manson family, including Tex, I believe, kills the people who run the ranch, like the new horse ranch part of Spawn Ranch. And that, much like the stuntman that they kill later, is not discovered until a decade later.
Right. Yeah, so that's not, I mean, you can tell some seedy things are going on here, but nothing's really explicitly said or shown on screen. Instead, we have some goofball stabs Cliff's tire.
Oh yeah.
And there's a great little spot in here where he walks over, he punches him in the face, feet go flying, blood splatters out of his mouth. He punches him again. He picks him up. There's a group of horrified hippies who have never seen such violence in their, very pampered lives.
This is the man who was going to beat Bruce Lee in a street fight, mind you. Like,
so he looks over at this group and he goes, "Ladies," and he punches him a third time.
And then he makes him change the tire.
And he makes him change the tire.
It's
Anyways,
so good.
So then he gets out right as Ted shows up, narrowly escaping, more or less. Okay.
Yeah, it's implied that Tex is a bad dude.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they get suspicious of Cliff, they're like, go get Tex and he'll handle it. And you're like, oh God, okay.
Yeah.
So Tex is the guy who handles things.
Yeah. Well, I guess when I almost looked at him as like second in command when Manson's not there.
Yeah.
Okay. So Cliff leaves. Tate's had her, matinee movie showing, and Rick Dalton is redeemed. The two, Cliff and Rick Dalton, come back from Italy from making some spaghetti westerns. They're having one last hurrah.
Yep, because Dalton can't afford to pay Cliff anymore. Because he got a wife in Italy.
Got a wife.
And he spent a lot of money
Francesca
from his movies living the high life in Italy. So he's coming back with enough money to be okay.
Yeah.
But they're going to have to sell their house, downsize,
Yeah.
Maybe get into like advertising or something. So he can't afford a stuntman anymore is the long and the short of it.
So anyway, this is our last hurrah. And in real life, this is when the Tate murders take place.
So in real life, it's the same night that Sharon Tate and her friends and Sebring get murdered by the members of the Manson family.
Right. But boy, did they get the wrong house on this night.
Yeah, well, it's funny how the nights parallel because Sharon Tate's crew go out to have a pretty docile, just gentle like dinner, and Cliff and Rick Dalton go out to get absolutely hammered.
So drunk that they have to take a cab home.
And in the 60s, that's a big deal.
In 1969, they have to take a cab home.
From what I understand, the standards of driving intoxicated were different then.
I would sure hope they've changed.
Yeah, but also,
years.
I think it speaks to how drunk they were because we've all met, most drunk people think they can drive up until they are really drunk. And
right.
If the drunk person is telling you they can't drive, they are gone.
And I don't see these two characters being the responsible ones in the room.
Based off of how they drove for the rest of the movie sober? No. Not at all. But they get super drunk at the same time that Sharon Tate and her friends are having a pretty low-key dinner.
Yep. So these hippies show up in their car that's barely running.
Their gremlin mobile.
and Rick Dalton comes out with a drink in hand,
drunk as a skunk with a margarita pitcher in his hand,
and he says, "You dirty hippies, get out of here!
I will call the cops if I see you."
This is a private road, Anyway, so they're kicked to the literal curb, and they come up with knives, and Tex has a gun.
Yep. Well, and they were actively scoping Sharon Tate's house.
Right.
But Rick comes out, and he almost gets shot by Tex. Like, Tex thinks about it real hard. And then as he leaves and they're making fun of him, one of the other members of the Manson family is like, well, what if we kill him? Because she recognizes him.
He's from Bounty Law, which ironically is still what he's recognized from. He's done all these other things. He's been in all these TV shows, and he's still recognized from Bounty Law.
Yep. And so she's like, and they all recognize him, and she's like, these are the people who taught us to kill. Like, our whole culture is about violence and killing. So why don't we kill the people who taught us how? And they're all like, oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Oh yeah, for hippie philosophical.
So one of them chickens out as they're walking up to the house, but the other two of them have knives, and Tex has a revolver, and they walk up to the house, which is pretty much exactly the weaponry that they actually had when in real life they murdered Sharon Tate and her group.
So they break into the house. Cliff has smoked a acid dipped cigarette.
Cliff,
and he's like, "Are you real?"
Dude is so high he couldn't get his dog food out of the can for his dog.
He was struggling.
Bro was having a rough time.
He's having So, anyways,
he just starts laughing at him.
So he's like, "Are you real? Who are you?" I know you. And Tex goes, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business." And he goes, "Nah, it was dumber than that." So, anyways, and then the star of the movie, Brandy. Cliff's dog bites Tex's arm.
He signals her. Like he pieces together what's happening. They get Rick Dalton's wife out of the house, and as soon as they're all focused on Cliff, he signals his dog, and his dog just pounces.
The dog takes out Tex. He takes out one of the other ones with the can of dog food.
Blinds her.
Smashes her nose in.
Yeah.
It's just, it's so funny. It's so over the top.
This is the part of the movie where I quit liking it. Just to clarify.
Really?
This is the part of the movie where I tapped out. I was like, all right.
Okay, so
anyway,
if you take this, I really look at, and a lot of people, there's even, I was telling my fiance about this when we watched it. I said, there's conspiracies that the Manson murders were set up by the CIA or FBI to end the counterculture movement. Now, obviously, it's never been proven, and that's, like I said, conspiracy. But if you take it from not necessarily saying, oh, that's what really happened, but if you take it from a perspective of these jackasses not ruined, but put a dark stain on this golden time in Hollywood and put a dark stain on, this great part of American culture, you're kind of angry at them. You're like, you know what? We had something good and you freaking ruined it. And
Yeah. And a lot of it, in reality, a lot of the hippie movement was just brought down by the inevitable, like, more and more people agreed with part of what they stood for. And so they became less iconic and they just got incorporated back into mainstream culture.
Right.
Like, part of the reason the 70s look like and are like the 70s were is because hippie culture just kind of gets, like, mixed with the middle class, like, stand up, quote unquote, like, culture that it opposed, and then you get most of the 1970s. But
I think this is the turning point from the hippie movement into the kind of rebellious anti-war 70s,
which is
ironic. We kind of go from the
60s
to the 70s.
This is also clearly when anybody not named Quentin Tarantino lost all say in how the movie goes.
Yeah.
So, back to the slaughter.
So what happens is you have Tex and you have these two other, I don't remember their names. I should have written their names.
I can look them up real quick.
I mean, honestly, they're the other two hippies.
Yeah.
One of them stabs Cliff in the ass. Stabs him right in the butt. And this is when
in real life, it's Tex, Watson, Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel, but they all, in the movie, they all have different names that they very possibly had in the Manson family. But those are the people who actually are there.
In real life, one of them did turn away.
Yeah, but she just stood guard. She didn't run away. She just watched
she didn't actually leave. I got you. Okay.
But it was probably, my guess is she got cold feet and she was like, I'll just watch the house.
Right. Anyways, so Tex is getting, demolished by this dog. The other one's getting her face basically just smashed in.
Yeah. Well, because Cliff is just eviscerating
right
her.
Smashing her head into literally anything and everything he can find.
And then she's very clearly dead, and then he keeps doing it.
He just keeps going.
Yeah.
But he's tripping. So maybe he didn't know.
He is super high on LSD, to be fair.
And then you have, while all of this is happening, Rick Dalton with his headphones on, chilling in his pool. With his radio right next to it, which I was like, is that not going to electrocute you?
It's fine, whatever.
So I think it's battery powered.
Yeah.
It's not plugged in, so I think that's... Well, that wouldn't electrocute you if it's battery powered.
I don't know. I'm sure I've heard enough people drop their phones in bathtubs and like. I guess it just depends. Point being, it's not a good idea. Don't take your battery power radio into the pool.
But anyways, so it goes into the pool and no one gets electrocuted. But somebody does get freaking burnt to a crisp with a flamethrower.
Yes, because there was a throwaway line 2.5 hours earlier in the movie that he got to use a flamethrower in one of his World War II movies.
Well, there's a little scene and
that he actually used it. Like it was him using the flamethrower.
This is a pretty well-known little side note, but I'll say it anyways. The scene where he's using like fake test footage of him using the flamethrower. He's like, oh man, is there anything we can do about that heat? And that's actually Leonardo DiCaprio. Like he's not acting. He's asking for so, and the guy's like, it's a flamethrower.
So freaking funny.
So
it's a flamethrower. And he goes, oh yeah.
But anyways, that's a legitimate line. Also I liked how, this came out after Inglourious Bastards, but him using a flamethrower on a group of Nazis in a movie starring Brad Pitt.
Oh, it just scratches every itch.
It's so great. We need Inglourious Bastards 2 starring Leonardo DiCaprio.
So the hippies are dead and they're killed viciously.
Yeah, so he burns her in a pool. Ironically, in Scream 5, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Scream 5. Also, how she dies. Also, how she dies in that movie. She gets burnt.
Original.
Yes.
So they're all dead. Cliff goes into an ambulance. He's kind of giving his statement, but he's still tripping. So he's useless. And then Rick Dalton is like, I didn't see anything. This crazy woman came out firing a gun because she picks up Tex's gun.
Oh, yeah. She has the gun, but she can't see anything because he's blinded her by throwing dog food in her face.
Right. So she's blind and her nose is broken. And then she's like half drowning in the pool because she's blind. She falls into the pool. And then he, lights her on fire. And Rick Dalton offers to go to the hospital with Cliff, who got stabbed in the thigh. And he's like, I'll be fine.
That is not thigh. That is ass.
Okay, stabbed in the ass. Apparently, that's a very important thing for Dustin.
It is. It's important because the femoral artery, if he'd been stabbed on the other side of his leg.
Isn't it femoral?
Femoral?
Femoral artery? But anyway, he gets stabbed in the upper pelvic region of his body. That help you out? Is that okay?
No, I don't like it.
And Rick Dalton's like, buddy, I will go to the hospital with you. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. I'm fine. And
go take care of that expensive wife of yours.
So they leave. Rick Dalton's kind of just like walking around because, all these people just
still in his robe.
Yeah, in his robe.
I'm pretty
still
sure.
Drunk, I'm sure. And he walks by Sharon Tate's house and Sebring comes out and he's like, hey man, what the hell was that? Like we heard all these screams and he explains it and he goes, oh damn.
He explains it in the most I really don't even know. He's like, there's some hippies broke into my house.
Well, because he doesn't really know what happened.
He's like, those hippies, I ran them off earlier and then they came back and she burst through my door.
He explains it exactly like you would explain it if you had been sitting in your pool listening to the radio and then you walked into your house and there were these two dead bodies and your best friend had been stabbed with a knife. He's just like, these crazy hippies came in and I burned one to death. And the other two, my friend killed because I guess they were trying to kill us.
He goes, yeah, I had that flamethrower. And he's like, oh, from your World War II movie. And he's like, yeah, I still have it. It still works, apparently.
And then Sharon Tate gets on the intercom and she's like, hey, Jay, are we good? Like, is everything okay? He goes, oh, yeah, no, they're fine. The hippies are dead. It's fine. It was a break-in. But Rick Dalton's here. And she goes, Rick Dalton from that TV show?
From Bounty Law.
From Bounty Law.
Again, all that anyone knows him from.
And he goes, yeah, hi, Sharon. She goes, oh my gosh, that sounds so terrible. Would you like to come in?
Come in and have some drinks? He's already been plastered all night.
And he goes, I would like that. Yeah. And so that's the end of the movie.
That's the end of the movie.
It's him going to have drinks with the still alive Sharon Tate.
And he mentions earlier that he's like one dinner party away from starring in a Polanski movie.
So it's implied that
he may find greater success as a result of this. Okay.
Ugh.
There's the movie, man.
That's it.
So you texted me when you finished this and you said, what the F was that?
So, okay. It's hard to do a history section of this movie like I've done with the other ones because it's not other than the Tate murders and just the references to the Manson family, it's not really about like a historical thing.
There are lots of things in there that are historically
there's
accurate.
Lots of cultural like I really like the way the three different ways they portrayed like existing in the golden age of Hollywood. I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
I think the attention to detail in props and vehicles and movie stylings is great. I love that Rick Dalton has an issue with spaghetti westerns and he thinks that they're crap movies because if you've ever objectively watched a spaghetti western, they are not high quality. They're good.
Everyone speaks in their own language, and then it's dubbed over later.
And Clint Eastwood, for example, really got his start in spaghetti westerns. So good actors did come out of them.
He was also, fun fact, Clint Eastwood also starred in a show called Rawhide, which was during the 60s and was part of this Western genre of television that dominated the top charts during this time.
And he has no way of knowing that spaghetti westerns become like cult classics,
right?
Like that 50 years after he's dead, people are gonna love the movies he's in because they're so crunchy and weird. So that was good. I like the idea of incorporating all of these people casually. So I love that Bruce Lee has a moment in it. I love that Steve McQueen has a moment in it. I like that Sharon Tate is who they chose, and I like that it's vaguely framed around the Manson, the Sharon Tate murders by the Manson family. I like the portrayal. I like for me, the movie does not equal the sum of its parts. Like I like all the parts of the movie, and then put together, I'm like, what did I just
The characters
watch?
were real, and the story was fiction.
Yeah, and like Rick Dalton and Cliff are completely fictional.
Oh, well, yeah. But I mean, like, a lot of the people in
everybody else that they encounter is either real or based off a real person.
Yeah.
So even what I liked is even the fight between Cliff and Bruce Lee is based off of Bruce Lee. In real life, it was more of a joke than it was an actual encounter. But on the set of Green Hornet, Bruce Lee was talking shit to the stuntmen. And he was like, I could take all of you. And one of them was just this big burly dude who for the rest of like that production run of Green Hornet would fireman carry Bruce Lee everywhere just to prove a point that he may be a bad man, but he's still a very small man.
Interesting.
But it was more of a friendly like joke. It wasn't like an antagonistic thing.
Right.
But the fact that Quentin Tarantino did his research and kind of altered these moments to his movie, it's just that in my mind, if you're going to make historical fiction, like historical fiction has to be plausible to be powerful. And he kind of lost that when
right at the very end.
Right at the end. Well, when the Tate murder doesn't happen at all. Like it'd be one thing if it almost happened and then like Rick Dalton and Cliff are there or go over for a dinner party. Like it was so close. And because he just completely shifts the focus away from it, I think it loses a lot of the power of the what if. In my mind.
Maybe that probably bothers you more than it bothers me.
Yeah, well, because like historically, like I mean, what if a Navy SEAL and his drunk buddy with a flamethrower lived next to everybody who'd ever been murdered and distracted? Like it was, to me, it was just he had put so much work into the rest of it that just felt historically, it just felt lazy to me. I think it's the best way I can describe it.
I almost feel like he was like at the end, he's like, we're just gonna have fun with it.
I think he just ran out. I literally just think he ran out of juice. Like,
well, what are you gonna do? How would you end it? How else would you end it?
Well, I don't know. And that's the thing. I would try to keep it closer to what actually happened. Just because, like, let me put it this way. You have a redemption arc for Rick Dalton internally, but you don't really have one for Cliff. You even arguably have one for Sharon Tate in the sense that it's implied, like the movie says that she doesn't really like Roman Polanski all that much by the end of the movie. So he goes to England or wherever to film a movie. So she gets to spend time with people she actually cares about, who actually love her. And she survives. So that's kind of her redemption arc. But Cliff doesn't get one. Like he doesn't get a chance that he's more than just a thuggy dude who is a stuntman.
I think Cliff gets to prove that he's a good guy. Because he's basically blacklisted for murdering his wife, which he's never admitted to, but we found out he really did it. But he's kind of blacklisted for it, and he gets to prove like, hey, I'm a good person at heart. He checks on an old friend to make sure that they're safe. I think that's his. I don't know if you'd call it redemption, but that's kind of like, okay, this is who he is.
Yeah, but
I
think that would have been more powerful and more historically convenient if it would have been a direct, like, not rescue, but a direct interference with the upcoming murder of Sharon Tate, as opposed to like a complete and utter change of pace.
All right, let me get one more fun fact in here before we give our ratings and get out of here. Sergio Corbucci, the director of the fictional spaghetti western that Britt Dalton stars in, Nebraska Jim,
Yeah.
which may possibly be named after a 1966 film called A Gunman Named Nebraska. Anyway, Sergio is a real director. He famously wrote and directed the original Django.
Okay.
And then obviously Quentin Tarantino made Django Unchained.
Right. And then I want to add, like, since there wasn't a whole lot of independent history in this one that I could analyze, and it was just feeding off of what was good, which is fine. I mean, it's fun for me to do that. I do want to say that one thing I think that they nailed is the detachment of stars during the golden age of Hollywood from the rest of the world and the rest of like society, and the fact that even the stuntmen kind of just live this like life apart. Right. Because it's the golden age, and that's how they were viewed. And it's also the tail end of the golden age, so you can see it all kind of like crumbling at the foundation. But there's enough left that maybe, just maybe, you can reclaim this thing. I just thought that was a really good tone to like signify, if not the history, the social memory of that era.
There's a good little piece of that whenever Cliff is driving Rick Dalton's car because Rick Dalton can't drive anymore. Yeah. And he parks this, and I don't remember what the name of the car is. Or what type of car it is.
He parks this very high quality car, and then he gets into this absolute beater.
Yeah, barely running piece of crap.
That he drives like a bat out of hell.
Yeah. But anyways, so it kind of shows that exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
just the disconnect of, and like Rick Dalton is all concerned about his career, and like if he doesn't have a career, Cliff doesn't have a place to live. Right. So yeah, whether or not you could historically be like, actors acted like that, I think it's a great testament to how we remember that era, for sure. And that as aloof as Hollywood stars are now, and like as untouchable as they feel, they at least interact with the public now, and that was not nearly as much of a thing then.
Yeah, social media has definitely broken down that barrier quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
All right. Rating? Historical rating?
Yeah, historical rating.
It's kind of a difficult one.
Well, since it's intended to be historical fiction, I'm gonna give it. I'll give it a 7 because I think that everything except the fact that Sharon Tate does not get murdered is really, really good and like really close. But that being said, it's the fact that it's so questionable going in, like whether it's going to happen or not. Like that kind of takes it away from me, because if they kind of made it clearer from the beginning that it wasn't going to happen, I think the historical part of me would have dealt with it better. But the fact that it not only does it not happen, but it not happens in like the most unrealistic way humanly possible, kind of takes away from it. And also, like, the Sharon Tate murder is a bigger moment in American society than it is in American history, but it's a big deal because like they got murdered for no reason. Like the Manson family doesn't even have a reason to do it. They're just like, oh, we just wanted to show you that we could kill people and make a statement. So again, if it had been,
wasn't originally intended to start a quote unquote civil war or race war.
So the question is always, does Charles Manson want to start it, or does he just think it's coming? Nobody's sure. I'm cool with it not happening because that's the whole purpose of like alternate history or like historical fiction. It's just the way that it doesn't happen kind of takes away the importance of the Manson family, because it's one thing if they almost kill this woman, or if they try to kill this figure and, you know, they don't succeed or whatever, or they try to kill the innocence of Hollywood or the goldenness of Hollywood and they get stopped. But instead they try to kill the deadbeat, like lackadaisical, like uppity part of Hollywood and get murdered. So for me, it just took away from the historical impact of what actually happened without replacing it with something else, I think is the best way I can describe it. Enjoyment factor, I got to give it a 6. Like,
6?
Yeah, I'd watch it again. Okay, I will give the first 2 hours and 10 minutes of that movie an 8. Okay. I give the last 20 minutes a 4.
Okay, so that balances out to a 6.
I did not enjoy the idea of why they went to his house. I didn't enjoy the fight scene. I enjoyed it from like it's a cool fight scene to watch it. Yeah. But like plot wise, I didn't like it. I thought it was lazy. And I'm not a film critic. I have no place to say that except my own personal opinion. But like I would watch it if like you asked me to, or like if a friend wanted to watch it, but I would not watch that movie again of my own. Like I wouldn't just put it on and be like, I'm going to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's fair. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I definitely liked it more the second time. I have been given the same score for all of our films so far.
If you don't give this at least an 8 or a 6, I'm going to go through that window, like make a call, commit.
I am not going to give this a 7.
Okay.
I'm not going to give this an 8.
You're going to give it a 9.
I'm gonna give it an 8.5.
Oh my gosh, you did a half.
I did a half.
Oh
so
my god.
I did 8.5.
Write this down on your calendars, ladies and gentlemen.
I also agree. I just get so caught up in it because it's such a snapshot of the time. Everything that happens in this film is like it's done purposefully. The amount of research, work, and love that went into this is just it's one of those things that's kind of baffling.
Yeah.
Like you think of can one person write all this? Can one person do all this? And it's incredible.
And I would even be willing to like up the history rating to an 8 just because the portrayal of like the Manson family, like it's really
Hollywood.
Yeah, like okay, I'll take my loathing of the last 20 minutes out of my history rating a little bit more. I'll give it an 8 because you're right. Like
an 8 and then what, a -5?
Yeah, probably.
For the last 20 minutes.
The parts that try to be historically accurate are awesome. So I'll go ahead and give it an 8. Like it gets as close as you can without trying to be like, Fury Saving Private Ryan, like something that is supposed to be a snapshot. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So we got my first non-7, 8.5.
Nice.
Love this movie.
Nice.
So moving on to next week.
It's Troy, right? Because we're doing our Brad Pitt.
We're doing Troy
Double feature.
I have not seen it in a long time. No, okay. I've seen it before, but I have not seen it in a long time.
Nice.
I only remember pieces of it. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
All right. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back next week.
See you next time.
Yeah.